So Alice, interesting, last week we had this, you shared so openly with us, it was beautiful, about a moment that happened with you where you were
That's
triggered and,
right. Yeah.
things in your world. And
Mm,
so, and it's had me thinking and reflecting, and actually another conversation came up in the week that
mm,
just kind of took me back to something I heard a long time ago that I think will be
okay.
wonderful to share here. And it's along the same theme, I suppose, of when we've been hurt by
Yes.
someone.
Right.
What can we do? And yes, we can. Last week we shared, asked the question, who do I want to be? How do I want to be? And this
Mm,
is a little bit more like after the fact. So in that
okay.
moment, we've maybe been able to not say what we might have said before, or we've leant
Hmm.
in and been, like changed how we've been.
Yeah.
And then it's after the fact, quite often, I know for me in the past, I've
Mm,
when I've spoken on the phone to a friend, or sat down with another friend and to have a cup of tea or something, it's kind of like quite a nice feeling to go back and share like the
what's
story,
happened?
what's
Yes.
happened, and
Yeah, I see.
woe is me, and can you
Mm,
believe that so and
such and
so.
such. Mm,
And then in the sharing of the story, I mean, I don't know why as humans it feels so good to sometimes share, but in the sharing of the story, a little part of us kind of hangs on to that story.
mm.
And then the next time you share the story, and it's funny how often it goes. And as the more we share, the more the story grows. And
Yeah.
then
I caught a fish and it was this big. Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah.
and so this has had me remembering, so sorry, I'm circling back to it, a talk that I went and listened to years ago.
Mm,
Gosh, and it's actually probably about 12 years ago, just because I remember that we were living in Sydney at the time, and that was 12 years ago.
okay.
And Dr. Robbie Sonderegger went and
Okay.
spoke at the church we were at the time.
Right.
And I don't think many people were expecting to hear what he had to say, because the topic we were listening to was all around healing. And the topic he actually spoke about was forgiveness.
Yeah,
And
right.
perhaps if we knew he was going to talk about forgiveness, I don't know if we would have gone or not
All
gone.
gone? Yeah, okay. Yeah.
And but it was so interesting. And this is just I haven't thought about this talk in ages, but last week's topic, and it's funny how then interactions, it's just brought this
Mm,
all up for me.
yeah.
The importance of forgiveness.
Mm,
And
hmm.
I know over the past number of years working in the coaching space, I've had quite difficult conversations sometimes with clients around this theme of forgiveness,
Mm,
where clients have said to me, like with real conviction, but that's not what I'm here to do. I'm not going to forgive that person. Like, I don't
yeah.
need to, I don't have to, I've got all right not to.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's,
Interesting, because when you say the word forgiveness, I think we probably all have an assumption of what that means or what that looks like to us. And I
yeah.
wonder if everybody's assumption is the same, or I wonder if the word forgiveness actually is different for different people. Like people assume it means one thing, but maybe it doesn't mean that.
Yeah, and that's
Uh,
exactly what that Dr. Robbie Sonderegger's talk was all about. I'd never actually heard someone sharing that perspective of forgiveness.
okay.
And it's been so helpful,
Okay.
what he shared that night. So if you're listening to this,
Yeah.
what I'm sharing with you came from Dr. Robbie Sonderegger. He's a clinical
Yeah.
psychologist, he's a Christian, he's a
Mm-hmm.
beautiful man, he's a teacher,
Mm-hmm.
and
He's
he's
often
a
in the space
speaker.
with kids too, isn't it? Parenting and things like that as well. He
Yeah,
often is in
yeah.
that space.
Often in the space of parenting, often in the space of trauma
Yeah.
uh, victims, or survivors from big. He was actually sharing about how he sometimes gets called into war-torn areas to work with the
Right.
surviving victims of and natural disasters and things. So a
Mm.
phenomenal man.
Yeah.
And so again, I listened to this 12 years ago, but I bought the CD. So that's how long ago it was.
Back in the good
And
old days.
back in the good old days of CDs and CD players, and I re-listened to the CD. And
That's so funny.
a couple of years back, noticing how often this is coming up in my coaching, I actually wrote a little book which has a story, and then I think on the last page it was his points summed up. And so
Okay.
I'd love to share
Yes,
that
please.
little book with our listeners. So in the
Yes.
membership, I'll post it in the membership. It'll be there free for any members.
Okay,
You
great.
can find it there. But basically, he was saying that forgiveness has got everything to do with, like, if I'm deciding to forgive you, say, for
Mm-hmm.
example,
Mm-hmm.
me forgiving you has everything to do with me and my heart, and it's actually
Yeah.
not got much to do with you at all,
Right. Okay. All right. So what does it have
which
to
was
do with,
new.
how is it to do with your heart if I've wronged you?
So if you've wronged me,
Mm.
you might, in your shoes and from your
Mm-hmm.
perspective and from where you're sitting, not believe that you've wronged me.
Okay.
It might,
Yeah.
the way from where you're sitting, you have all every right to have
Mm-hmm.
said or done or acted or
Whatever.
behaved or whatever the thing was.
Mm-hmm.
But from where I'm sitting on my side, I'm feeling hurt. I'm feeling, like last week, what did you say? Stabbed in the heart.
Yeah.
And we spoke last week about what do we do? What do we do?
Mm.
So maybe I've chosen to be less fiery and less reactive, and I've held my tongue and I've considered
That's good.
where
I'm
you're coming
pleased.
from,
Yeah.
so there's progress, right?
Yeah, well done.
But I could still hang on to the fact that I feel wronged by you
Yeah.
and I feel hurt by you. And
Yeah.
yes, you've got stuff going on in your world, but it still wasn't fair and it wasn't right and it wasn't good. And that, without even me realizing it, can really impact on my energy and my own self-worth and who I am and the
Mm.
story I'm telling myself, not only about you, but myself.
Yeah.
So me choosing to forgive, like the act of forgiveness, it needs to come from me if I'm the one feeling
Yeah.
hurt or done
Mm-hmm.
in for.
Mm-hmm.
And what was interesting, what he shared that day, is forgiveness is me choosing to let go. And
Mm.
it doesn't require me to speak to you personally and say,
Okay.
hey, Ali, I'm choosing to forgive you. I can, if I want to, have
Mm.
that conversation, but it doesn't require me to say, look, I'm going to choose to forgive you. And it doesn't require you to say, okay, that's like, thank you, or, it doesn't require a response from you at all.
Okay. All right. So it's you choosing to let go.
It's me choosing to let go. And the beauty of that is, what he was sharing when he shared with everybody, is we can even choose to forgive someone who is no longer with us. They've
Yeah.
passed away, choosing someone that's not even in our world anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe someone's wronged you 20 years ago and you don't have
Yeah.
contact with them. You can still choose to forgive them. And it doesn't mean you've got to try and find their phone number,
And
send
let
them a
them
letter,
know. Mm.
and let them know. No, it's a condition of your own heart to choose to forgive and let go.
Okay.
And it's a letting go.
Mm.
But it's also what he shared. It's a not saying it's okay that you've done that to me.
Mm.
So forgiving is not saying, well, it's fine that you hurt me.
Yeah.
Because when you say it's fine that you hurt me, it's kind of like, well, what he shares, it's kind of like saying, well, I'm not that worthy, and so
Mm.
yes, you can hurt me because I'm not worth much anyway.
Yeah. Which is not what we want. We
No,
don't want people
no,
thinking that way. Yeah.
no. So what he's saying is you're saying, yes, you hurt me.
Yeah.
Yes, it was an injustice. It
It
wasn't
was
right.
wrong. Mm-hmm.
It was wrong. Um, and but for me to move on, I'm going to choose to let go.
Yeah.
And I'm going to choose to, and as you said, it's not the same as pushing something under the carpet, because if it needs another
Mm.
conversation, absolutely, you go and have another conversation with the person.
Mm.
But it's then having a conversation to resolve something. It's not,
Yes.
I'm not carrying this grudge and not coming to have the
No.
conversation with a grudge.
That's right. And if you were to sweep it under the carpet, it means you're just ignoring it. You're not even making the
Yeah.
decision to let something go. You've just ignored it. You're kind of pretending it didn't happen. That's what sweeping under the carpet is. Whereas in
Yeah.
this instance, you're not sweeping it under the carpet. You're being very intentional and saying, okay, I don't want to take this with me. I'm not carrying
Yes.
it with me
Yeah.
any longer.
And one of the metaphors or analogies he gave, which is very helpful, he said, you know, in kind of to explain, well, what does it even mean to let go? Because maybe you're listening to this and you're going, what do you even mean? Like, what are you talking about? You know?
Yeah.
And he gave this analogy of a mosquito bite.
Okay.
And he said, you know, if a mosquito bites you, what are your options?
Mm.
So I don't know, you tell me, Elle, what are your options?
Here's what I'll tell you what I've learned, because where we live on like the back of the wetlands in North
Yes.
Queensland. So we've got actually midges are even worse, but we've got lots of mozzies and midges. And here's what I've learned. If I don't scratch it at all, within sort of 24 hours, it's completely gone, wouldn't even see it. So
Yeah.
what do I do if I get bitten? I do my absolute best not to scratch it, because once I start scratching it, I can't stop.
Yep. Because it feels so
It
good to
needs
scratch.
to be scratched, and it feels so good to be scratched. I've just remembered when I was pregnant with one of our kids, Lincoln, there's that pregnancy rash. It's called PUPS or something, can't remember what it stands
Okay.
for. And I was covered head to toe in this rash. And it was so itchy. Like, I thought I'm going to go completely crazy because it was so itchy. And I'd go in the shower and I'd crank the shower to be hot so I could scratch it all. And then I'd have to crank it to be cold at the end to try and numb it and make it all cold, because the more I scratched it, the itchier it got. Even though it felt good, it got itchier and itchier and itchier. Sorry, that's
Yeah.
completely
No, well, that's such a good metaphor for
Mm,
like what forgiveness is. So if we're
right.
choosing to let go, it's like choosing to not scratch the itch or choosing to not scratch the bite.
Wow.
And so you can choose to scratch it. And in his language, scratching it is like he called nursing, cursing, and rehearsing. So
Okay.
you nurse the wound, you know,
Yeah.
the wound to your soul, the heart wound. You
Yeah.
nurse that ache.
Yeah.
You curse, you know, the other person
What
in your
happened?
mind, you
Yeah.
know, and then you rehearse. You retell the story over and over.
Yeah. Which we
And
get
that
really
is
good at.
like, yeah, and it feels so good, right? You
It
know?
often does.
But what if you knew that that was like scratching this mosquito bite? And if you scratch long enough and hard enough, you actually then end up with a sore, like a
Yeah.
wound. And then you actually end up with I don't know, if you know, a scar, maybe, if
Scar.
you're someone that scars easily. So it's
Yeah.
scab and then it
Infection
scars and
sometimes.
infections. Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
And that is what unforgiveness does.
Yeah, right.
And hearing it shared like that was and it gave such a clear visual. And I
Mm.
was like, wow. So you know, and we talk about our soul being hurt and our soul being bruised, and if, you know, our heart being hurt. And what if you knew that your unforgiveness is just festering that wound in your heart, you know? And I think for me, it just was such a beautiful visual of the reason why forgiveness is so useful and
Yeah.
helpful, even though it might feel or sound countercultural or
Mm.
counterintuitive, or you might go, but it's, you know, that's
The
not
other
what I,
person really deserves me to not like them anymore. They
yes,
did the wrong thing, and we want to stand our ground because, yeah, and because I think we feel like, Kath, if we're letting something go, there's this feeling that we've said it's okay somehow. So I
yeah.
think that's where we get really torn as humans. Like, we don't ever want it to be okay. So to let it go kind of feels like we're doing that.
Well, back to what Dr. Robbie Sonderegger said about it. He said
Mm.
that, you know, so what is the difference between letting go and saying actually it's not okay? Like how do we do
Yeah.
that?
What is that?
And he said it's about what you allow to happen in the future moving forward.
Yeah.
So let's just say you know, last week you said you mentioned about recircling to the conversation at a better time and a different time and having that
Mm.
conversation around, you know what, that other day when you came home and you said XYZ, you know, it actually did hurt. And
Yeah.
that's actually not okay.
Mm.
And that's what he's saying. He's saying, you know, you're choosing to let it go. You're not going to hold a grudge in that person, but you're also not going to say it's okay you did that and you're allowed to do that over and over and over.
No.
And that's the difference.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which takes courage. You know, our podcast is called Brave, Strong, and Fulfilled. And it takes being brave and being strong
Yeah.
to have the courage to have those hard conversations and to say to somebody else, you know, it's not okay that you talk to me that
Mm.
way, or
Mm. Yeah.
yeah,
And so I guess, and I don't know how you would answer this, but I think sometimes when we forgive somebody and let something go, whether or not we then have a follow-up conversation, sometimes it does mean having certain boundaries put up in our life that we hadn't
yeah,
initially had, just moving forward, so that we can let it go and not rehearse it and not have to retell it. We end up having boundaries in our life. Yeah, so we can, I mean, that's part of the self-reflection too, isn't it? Looking back, where did it go wrong? What happened? Moving
yeah.
forward, we don't want that to happen again. What could it look
And
like?
in wisdom, if a wise person once said, they always, these arguments and things always take two people. So it's even reflecting back on your own
What did I
part
do?
of
Yeah.
the, what did I do and what could I do
Mm,
differently? But I think, and then also just like the last thing I'm remembering, and there might have been something else that I've forgotten that he shared, but
mm,
as I said, I've got all the points in the handout we'll have.
great.
But he spoke about what it means to not remember. And he actually quoted the Bible on, that there's a
Mm,
story in the Bible where someone says, oh gosh, now I'm going to really fumble this wrong, but someone says, I think to Jesus, how many times do I have to forgive this person? And he said,
mm,
oh, 70 times seven. It's like,
mm-hmm,
and then so it's forgiving as often as what we need to, but then part of the forgiving and letting go is choosing to not remember. So he said, you're not putting your head in the ground and
right.
imagining that it didn't happen, or
Mm,
ignoring it, as you said, or just
mm,
sweeping it under the carpet. And human nature will be that, of course, you will remember. When you look back, you'll
mm,
remember. And he's not
mm,
saying that it's wrong to remember, but
mm.
when your head goes back to remembering,
Yeah.
it's to then decide to not
Not linger.
not linger, not
Mm,
rehearse,
mm-hmm,
not ruminate.
mm-hmm.
It's like, oh yes, somebody said
That's
something, it's reminded me of that, but you know what? I'm choosing to let that go and just redirecting.
redirect again.
Redirecting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Goodness. Well, I love the visual about the Mozzie bite. I love
Yeah.
that. That is something that I can take with me moving forward in my life, and to remind me of the importance of forgiveness, or letting something go. So
Yeah.
we don't end up scarred and infected, and it looks messy. um Moving forward, and going back to what we spoke about last week, it still circles back to, who do we want to be?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Thank you. I'm looking forward to reading your little your resource that you created many years ago. It'll be
Yes,
interesting
it's
to have a
it's
look.
a good one. I've got to go and find it. I'm
Yeah,
sure
I hope you can find it.
yeah, I hope I can find it too. But yes, I will find it because
Yeah.
I actually think I know where it is, just, looking back in my memories bank somewhere. And so yeah, we'll be popping that in the membership. And
Mm,
if you're listening and you're thinking,
yeah.
what's the membership, Al? Do you want to just
What is,
quickly
yeah, excellent. So you'll
share?
see attached to this episode a link. And what that link does is it sends you information to a platform, I guess, where it's information about what the membership is. And it is a space where we can pop in all of our free resources, all the resources that come up from our conversations on these podcast episodes. It is a place where we get to have group conversations, coaching conversations every month, which I'm really excited about. Speaking of that, we need to book out our calendars for November, off the top of my head, I think it was the 21st.
Yes, it is the 21st of November.
21st of November at 5 p.m. Brisbane time, so wherever you are in the
That's
world.
correct. Just checking. Yep.
Yeah, and so we have a group conversation, and there's also opportunity to participate in other courses, and there's other resources in there. Is that right? Have I
Yeah.
forgotten
Yeah.
anything? And it's a
Yeah.
community. It's a place where we can learn and grow together, and encourage each other. But yes, there's lots of resources to
Yeah.
support you on
So
your journey. Hmm.
So basically, your membership covers all the resources that you'll get inside there, and also it covers the group coaching. So if you are
Yeah,
a member in the membership, the group coaching is available to you free of charge. And
yeah,
we really had a fabulous
yeah, we did.
inaugural first group coaching last month, and it
Yeah.
was really insightful and helpful.
Mm,
And I know that I learn something new each time we
yes.
have these group coaching calls. So
Yeah, it was really
yeah, so join
enjoyable.
us. We'd love you to join us there.
Yes, and on that note, we will come together and join up again, Kath, for our recording for next week. Next
Yeah, see you
week.
then. See you,
Gotcha.
Elle.
Have a great week.
Cheers. Bye.